Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of my advanced modding tutorial series. And this episode we're going to add on to our CamoMine we made last episodes, a 3-part episode. And we're going to do that by adding a GUI. So when we right click the block, it will show us a GUI of the currently selected camouflages, and we can adjust that camouflage in there. Just as an example, I don't think it's too useful to do that. The currently implemented interaction works fine, I think. But this is just to show you how to do GUIs, and I think this will work for that. So for GUI you need a texture. So I've created one already. And it looks like this. So when we right click the block, we'll see these slots, the player slots, and these slots all represent a different side of the camouflage of the block, and we're going to interact with that. So this is just a plain texture, we can't do anything with that yet. So let's get started. Now, before we are going to dive into the code, I need to explain some concepts. Now, there's a GUI, and there's a GUI class as well in Minecraft, and the GUI class it only exists on the client side, and it will handle the rendering of the actual texture. So for example, I've taken the dispenser GUI. So this method, for example, will render the actual texture, and there is another one that displays the string, so it will display a inventory string in the bottom left of the GUI, and in the middle top it will display the inventory name, the GUI name, the block name. So it does things like that. Basically rendering, yeah, and handling of left clicking, right clicking, and processing of keys you press. You can do that in this class. Now there's another class, and that's called a container. And a container is basically your link between server and client when it comes to GUIs. So I've taken the container for dispenser again. And apart from that link, it will also define where the slots are laid out. So a slot is where you can click a stack. So you can take a stack when you left click on an item, and when you click on an empty slot, it will put it back in. So for the dispenser, that's all it does here. It says how the slots are laid out. It defines a unique identifier for that slot, and the position, X position, and the Y position, and we'll go over that in a second as well. And it also handles shift clicking of a slot. So when you shift click a slot in inventory, it needs to decide where to go, and you can do that with this as well. Now, another thing you can't see with the dispenser, but you can handle other fields that need to be synchronized with the client. So for example, you could look at the container enchantment, and you can see here that in an enchantment table you can see for 3 possible enchants, you can see what level it will take, and that level exists on the server because that's the side that determines what to do. Now the client doesn't know of that, so that needs to be synchronized. You could use a TileEntities description packet we've used last time. However, a description packet will be sent to all players within 64 blocks in the same dimension, and that's a little bit inefficient. Certainly when it's a value that's changing a lot. So a furnace that's its progress bar, or its progress bar, that will be changed a lot. Or if you're doing modded things like energy current energy levels, or for my pneumatic ref mod, the pressure of the block, that would be quite inefficient. So that's why you've got something like this, so you can detect and change this. This is something that's called on the server, and when a certain change happens, oh, this is done dirty, but when a certain change happens, it will send it to the client, and the client will receive it here. So that's that. So the container is basically a link between server and client. So let's create and do something with those classes. Our first step in making a GUI is registry. So I'll explain what that means, but for now we're going to create a GUI handler, a so-called GUI handler in our root package, and call it like that, and it needs to implement IGuiHandler. And this interface contains two methods which need to be implemented, and you'll see some familiar names here. So it will have basically what happens when you open a GUI, which you by the way always want to do on the server side. The server wants to have the container that belongs to a certain GUI ID, and the client, when the server opens the GUI, it will get the container and send to the client like, hey, this client needs to have this GUI open, and the client goes, okay, I'll open the GUI, and the server has given the ID with that. So the client will open the GUI, but it needs to know which GUI, and you'll have to return that in here. Now, the X, Y, and Z coordinates are given, and the world, so you can use TileEntities. You can get a TileEntity here, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, this is our plain GUI handler. It doesn't do anything, doesn't implement the methods right yet. But before we forget, let's notify FML about our GUI handler. Doesn't matter that much where you do it. I could do it after here. We can do network registry, instance, and register GUI handler. And with that, you need to tell which mod. So the mod instance, so we can just pass the normal instance, this instance, and we can do a new GUI handler. Now the reason why you want to give your mod instance is because these GUI IDs are different for every mod. So ID 0 for my mod is different from ID 0 of another mod. So that's nice, we don't get ID collisions. So that's that. Now, managing those IDs, I like to use a enum to keep track of those. So we can do a enum, public enum, and GUI IDs, and we can do CamoMine like that. And because this, for every GUI you're going to add an entry in here, and you also need to return a different instance in here. So what you could do is to switch GUI IDs values. So this will get an array of all values of this enum and put the ID in there. So we can do case CamoMine and return something. We're going to do return null here. Or even better, we can do throw new illegal argument exception no GUI with ID. Oops. So this is a nice way of handling that, because never should this ever be happening. And we can put it over here as well. So we're going to need to return a container here and a GUI here, and to do that we need a container and a GUI. So let's start with the container, shall we? It doesn't really matter that much, but let's do it in here, and let's put it in an inventory package and call it container CamoMine, or let's create a generic container advanced mod and make it extend container, the net Minecraft inventory one. And I've called this package inventory because like I said before, I'd like to do the same as Minecraft, or MCP rather, has called the packages, which is called inventory. You'll see in a package called inventory it has all the containers, so I'd like to do that as well. So we've created a container advanced mod, and this will be a container or base container basically. So our container CamoMine will extend that container advanced mod. Or did I do it the same? Yeah, block advanced mod, so container advanced mod. Cool. Now what I want to add in the base container is some common things. So a common thing is to add a player inventory, add all the player slots, all 36 player slots. And you could do that for every container like Minecraft has laid it out, but I think it's neater to do in a central method and call it from our other methods or other classes. So I'm going to copy that from some other another container class. So you can see what's happening here. You can see a nested for loop that goes to 3. So that very much looks like a 3x3 matrix. So that this means this is the inventory of the dispenser itself, and this is a 3x9. So these are the main slots of the player, and this is the hotbar of the player. So we could copy that over and make it more generic. Let's maybe keep it open. So we can call this a protected, because we're going to call it from an external protected, meaning that we can access it from a CamoMine as well. Protected voice at player slots. And we need to know which player. No. Inventory player. Player inventory, and the X position of that, of all the slots basically, and the Y position. So we're going to do that, and boom. Let's do it just like that. And this is the player inventory, and this is the whoops. Slot index start. And I'll explain those in a second. Whoops. +9 and that, and this is the X position This is the Y position, X and Y. So with this, if we call it with the player inventory, which you by the way can get, if we just do this, we've got a player we can play with. Inventory, you'll get a inventory player, which contains all the items of the player. Which, by the way, implements iInventory. So it's very important when you add a slot. The slot wants to have a inventory the slot is connected to. It wants to know which index this I'm doing it wrong. Which index of the iInventory this stack that's connected to the slot is, and the X and Y position. So I'm doing it wrong actually. I shouldn't do this, but instead I should just keep it like it was. So basically what's happening here is the hotbar has in the player inventory has assigned the index from 0 to 8 through 8. So when the hotbar gets added, it will go through 1 through 8, and it will from the player inventory add the slot 0 through 8, and the Y position will remain constant. It will only depend on the Y given here. And it's offset by what this main inventory will take. And then for every slot we add, we're going to add an X position of 18. 16 is exactly one slot wide, but 2 pixels extra. So this is in pixels. 2 pixels extra, so we have a little bit of a gap between slots. We might play around with that later. So the same happens for the main inventory, but it will start from the index of the player inventory from index 8, index 9, sorry, and it will go up through to 35. You can I times 2, 18, and well, it's 35 if I remember correctly. 36 slots minus 1. And the same deal for the X and Y position, but now the Y position doesn't remain constant. So that's how you play with slots to add them. Let's actually let's not do that here. What we can do is we can delete this. We need to implement this. This will generate an error, but we can make this an abstract class, and this will mean that this class needs to implement it instead. So when we're going to create a new container, what do we need to know? We want to know the inventory player inventory, and we also want to add the slots that belong to the TileEntity, the CamoMine. So we want to add the CamoMine, or let's just do a generic TileEntity TE. What? One second. Okay, that was weird, but I'm back. I did some derpy things with branching. So, let's move on. So, first of all, we want to add the player inventory. Or shall we do that after we add the CamoMine slots? Let's do it afterwards, but let's do this add player slots. And again, I'm using this dot so I can see which methods we have. And XY, I think I can use the same as those in here. So that's 84. Oh, this actually should be a 58. There you go. I needed to offset that. So 84 for the Y position and 8 and 84, I think. We'll see. We'll see that later. We can do can interact with is the same as in the I inventory can interact with. So if we look at I is usable by player. That's the one. So we can just forward that. So we could do private TileEntity CamoMine, or just TE. And we might want to move that to our generic class. This.te is TE. Player, and do return is usable by player. Okay. So let's now add the CamoMine slots. We can do that. Our CamoMine slots, if we look at a texture, it isn't really logical. You can't really find a good algorithm to loop through it. With this you can do a 3x9 matrix basically, nested for loop, but with this you could do these three or these three, but I don't know. And also if we want to map it to sites, if you look at Minecraft sites, you'll notice that 0 is like the bottom, 1 is the top, and I think it's nice to map them that way. So let's do that instead. I think I'm going to do 6 hard-coded locations. Add slot to container, new slot. And we can do the CamoMine as long as the instance you're passing to slot implements iInventory, it will work. So for your inventory to have slots from a certain entity, you need to have the entity be implementing iInventory. The index, so let's just do 0. So that's the bottom, I think. And the XY position we can do just do a random guess. I have no clue. Six times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do know that one is 36, 2 slots up above the other one. Although, yeah, it is. So that's 14. I think that's way too high, by the way. It's just a guessing game for now. 2 I'll just do in between. So that's 32. And just do these 2 left and right of that. So this is the X position, and by decreasing this I'll make the slot go left, and by increasing it I'll make the slot go right. Feeling I'm doing it wrong. Middle slot left, right. I think I've created my texture in the wrong way, haven't I? I have. I was like, I'm missing a slot still, but I'm not. So what we can do is adjust it real quick, like that. So this will mean the back, or shall we turn it around and do it like that? So I've done 0 is this one. No, 0 I've made this one. 14 is 2 slots up, so that's there. Then this one is 1 slot down again from there, is there. It's in between these 2 slots. Then we go left from that slot, so that's the 32 here, and 68 is over here. And then we should do about 5 to the right, 5 above. So that's really pixels, this. 5 to the right, 5 above. And a full slot to the right. So that's 9 and am I doing it right? Not really. 68 and 5, 73. This is just a guess. You'll have to line it up later. Unfortunately, you can do that while Minecraft is running, so you don't need to restart Minecraft. But this is just a initial guess. Yeah, 5. Okay, so this is our very basic container class, but what we want to do is also prevent a crash for now. Because we haven't defined a shift clicking behavior yet. Transfer stack and slot. And if you return null, I'll just do the default implementation for now by returning null. And this won't do anything for shift clicking. It shouldn't, at least. Whoops. Let's do that for the CamoMine. Okay. So this is our container. Let's do a... Well, we can return it already. We can do return new container CamoMine. And we should give the player inventory. And we should give the TileEntity, and that's CamoMine. And again, with this, whenever this method is called, your TileEntity should be there. If you've opened the GUI correctly, that is. And we still have to open the GUI ourselves. We'll get into that later. For now, let's create a GUI. So let's put it in a GUI package, which is, by the way, the same as how Minecraft does it. And for this, you need to implement or extend GUI container, not just. You've got GUI Screen and GUI Container. GUI Screen is for non-inventory GUIs, but this is in a inventory GUI, so. Ah, right. Well, let's do inventory player inventory instead, and let's give it the TileEntity CamoMine. And this GUI container actually wants the container, and that's a client-side container. So we could do a new container CamoMine. Use the player inventory from the constructor. And it's empty. And before we go further, we can do it here. We can do return new GUI CamoMine. Oh, whoops. That's the generic. I wanted to go too quick. CamoMine. GUI CamoMine extends GUI advanced mod. Nope. Make that abstract again. Oh. Okay, and you're fine again. Okay. So, new GUI CamoMine. Give it a player inventory again and basically the same arguments as this one over here. Okay, so that's our registry setup. Now we actually need to draw the GUI, but we could leave it like this, actually, for now. But this will just result in no texture being drawn. It will turn invisible, but at least we can confirm our currently set up code works well. We've written a little bit of code already, so it's good to test it halfway down the road. So let's open the GUI, and we can do that by... That's interesting. We've got a right-click behavior already, so how could we do that? Let's think about that. Okay, I've decided how to do it, and it's a little bit disappointing, but one option would be to make it dependent on whether or not the player is shift-clicking, or sneaking, to be exact. However, as far as I can remember, this onBlock activated will only be called when the player is not sneaking, to prevent interaction. You could do it with some kind of wrench item, so you can open the GUI from there, but I don't feel like creating an item for that. So for now I'm just going to comment this out. You could put it back in, will work perfectly fine, but instead we're going to do it, you're going to open the GUI in here. So to open a GUI, you need to do that from the player and from the server. So you need to make sure to have a not remote check and do a player.open GUI. And we need to give the mod instance so we know from which mod to open the GUI, and that's our mod, so we can do advanced mod instance. And the mod GUI ID is the same GUI ID as in here. So we need to return the CamoMine ID. So we can do IGuiHandler GUI IDs CamoMine dot ordinal. So for those of you who don't know, when you do ordinal from a enum, you get the index of the enum. So when we've got more here, blah blah blah, this will have 0 and this will have 1, and that's the same you're going to get when you do it right here. When you are going to pass 0, you'll get the first registered enum. So that will translate to each other. We can not save it. And world XYZ, which is fine already. So we can get the TileEntity from there. And this is why I was saying that whenever you're going to cast, you should have the TileEntity right there. Because you will always have it right here. Okay. I think that should be it actually. So we could check it and see if it works. And there we go. If we right click it, let's you'll see the stacks, and when we click on this it will remove the camouflage. And when we shift click, nothing happens. But we can interact with our GUI, with our inventory. I also notice there's no texture, and that's because I didn't implement my GUI fully yet. But we could change the camouflage to have that. Not really. There you go. And that's because the inventory doesn't allow for more items to put in. So when you try to click with a full stack, the slots will try to switch. So 64 dirt will go into the slot and 1 cobblestone will go in my hand. But because I can't put in 64 dirt in that slot, we've coded it to not do that. That won't work. So you'll see, you can see all the slots, and it looks quite like how I designed it, but we still have to line it up with the GUI texture. And also all player inventory slots can be seen. There you go. So everything works. Almost exploded. And it did. So let's add that texture. And this concludes part 1 of the GUI and containers episode, I'm sorry to say. Tune in for part 2 and the last part.